The night the sky split open, people thought it was the end of the world. Above the atmosphere, a scar tore across the heavens, jagged like shattered glass. At first, it shimmered with pale light, as though some great hand had peeled back the skin of reality. Then the true horror emerged. Ships, hundreds of them. Black, angular war machines gliding out of the rift, blotting out the constellations humanity had named since ancient times. The invasion was not announced with words. It was declared with fire. The first wave of strikes hit orbiting satellites, tearing communications apart. Space stations turned into silent wreckage, their lights flickering out as flames spilled into the void. Then came the attacks on Earth itself. Orbital bombardment screamed down like falling suns streaking through the atmosphere before smashing into the surface. Cities turned to infernos. Skyscrapers crumbled, their remains glowing like molten bones. Entire coastlines were swallowed, in boiling waves as kinetic rounds churned the oceans. In New York, people screamed as the skyline collapsed. In Beijing, a crater replaced a district. In Nairobi, fires spread across the plains. It wasn't a war at first. It was a slaughter. But humanity, stubborn to the last breath, fought back. Defense satellites still online fired their last missiles. Fighter squadrons scrambled through skies filled with debris. Old warships, long retired, were dragged back into service, their aging guns turned upward toward the alien storm. It was chaos, but it was resistance. At the heart of it all was one ship, the Resolute. She had not been built for glory but survival, a heavy cruiser designed to last in the harshness of deep space. Her hull was scarred from earlier skirmishes at the edges of the solar system. Her crew was a mix of veterans, rookies, and a handful of civilians trapped aboard when the invasion began. But she had something the others lacked. Captain Elias Kane. Kane was not a man easily shaken. Years of border wars had left their mark on him. A deep scar across his jaw, eyes like stone, and a voice that never wavered. He had lost comrades, worlds, even parts of himself in battles long before this day. Yet when the Dominion came in, force, when Earth's sky burned and hope seemed like smoke, he stood unbroken on the command deck. Status? His voice cut through the chaos. "Enemy fleet is everywhere," came the reply from the tactical officer, his voice trembling. "Our squadrons are scattering. We've lost contact with Luna Defense. Multiple cities are—" "Focus!" Kane snapped. His tone was harsh, but steady. Panic could kill faster than plasma fire. On the hollow map before him, the enemy fleet looked like a swarm of blades, each ship sharp and predatory. They moved with ruthless efficiency, carving through Earth's defenses as if they had practiced this war 1,000 times. But Kane saw what others could not: gaps, hesitation, the arrogance of a force convinced of its own supremacy. "They're hunting us," he muttered almost to himself. Not expecting a fight, just prey to be culled. The crew waited, watching. Him. His words were not loud, but they carried weight, anchoring them amid the storm. He straightened, jaw tight. "Then let's remind them what happens when prey fights back." With a single command, the Resolute launched from orbit, engines flaring against the void. Around them, firestorms painted the planet's surface. The Earth was bleeding, but not broken, not yet. In the corridors of the ship, crew members braced themselves. Engineers patched systems with bare hands and sparks flying. Medics cleared space for casualties they knew were coming. Marines checked rifles and armor, prepared for the possibility of boarding parties. The Resolute was more than steel now. It was a lifeboat, a warship, and a symbol. On Earth, millions of eyes turned to the sky. They saw ships falling, defenses burning, the stars blotted out. But somewhere up there, one ship was climbing higher, defying the impossible, and on that ship, Kane gave his first true order of the war: open fire. The Resolute's guns roared, streaks of light cutting across the blackness. One alien frigate exploded, then another. The Dominion had come to crush humanity in hours, but their first taste of resistance was a sting they had not expected. For the first time that night, the people of Earth saw something besides fire raining from the heavens. They saw hope, because though the sky burned, though death fell like rain, humanity was not done. And as long as one ship fought, one captain defied, one spark burned in the darkness, Earth still lived. The Ver Dominion did not conquer with brute force alone. They were hunters, and Earth was their hunting ground. In the silence of orbit, their warships moved like predators in dark water, patient, coordinated, merciless. Where human fleets scrambled in desperation, the Ver struck with precision. Entire squadrons vanished in ambushes. Convoys carrying refugees were lured into traps, their engines disabled before boarding craft descended like claws. Survivors were dragged screaming into captivity. The Ver soldiers themselves were worse than the ships. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies were wrapped in bioforged armor that shifted with their movements. 4 arms, each ending in clawed gauntlets, made them devastating in close combat. Their eyes glowed with a smoldering orange, light, and their voices were like gravel and static, rumbling through translation devices that spat out demands of surrender. But they never negotiated. Surrender meant chains, and chains meant silence. The Ver's empire thrived on obedience and fear. Captain Elias Kane studied every scrap of data that came in. From the bridge of the Resolute, he traced their hunting patterns, mapping out the routes of patrols, the timing of their ambushes. To most, the Dominion's assault looked like chaos, a storm no one could survive. To Kane, there was a rhythm beneath it. "They're not fighting a war," he told his officers. "They're running a culling. They believe we're animals, that don't deserve strategy, that arrogance is a weakness." His crew clung to those words because the alternative was despair. They had all seen too much already. Earth's defense fleet scattered, orbital yards reduced to floating scrap, colonies silenced. Humanity had been caught unprepared, still fractured by politics and rivalries, while the Dominion struck with unity and overwhelming force. But Kane refused to bow to inevitability. He saw the cracks in the enemy's armor, and he was determined to widen them. The Resolute began its campaign not with grand battles, but with small victories, ambushes hidden in asteroid belts, quick strikes at supply ships that the Ver arrogantly left lightly guarded. Kane ordered the crew to move silently, to strike like a blade in the dark, then vanish before enemy reinforcements arrived. Each success was a spark. For every alien frigate torn apart by the Resolute's guns, 100 humans watching from shattered colonies found the courage to resist. For every Dominion boarding party driven back into the void, stories spread of a ship that refused to die. And with each battle, Kane's reputation grew. To his enemies, he became a shadow they could never pin down. To his allies, he became the proof that humanity's spirit had not been crushed. Still, victories came at a cost. After one raid, near the orbit of Mars, Kane walked the infirmary halls, where wounded crew groaned beneath the hands of overworked medics. Burned flesh, shattered limbs, blood pooling on steel floors. This was the price of every victory. He lingered at each bed, offering a word, a nod, a look that said he saw them as more than soldiers. They were family now, bound by fire and loss. In the engineering bay, Lieutenant Mara Voss cursed as she held together failing systems with little more than scavenged wiring and stubborn willpower. The Resolute was held together by patches and prayers, yet still she flew. Kane admired her resolve, though he never said it aloud. And then there was Sergeant Holt. A ground soldier trapped aboard since the first evacuation, Holt volunteered for every boarding action. His face bore scars like maps of old battles, and he carried his rifle as if it were a part of him. When others hesitated, Holt went forward. "Let 'em come," he would growl before every fight. "I've been waiting to hit something uglier than me." They were the heart of the ship, as much as its reactors and cannons. Kane relied on them not only for skill, but for what they represented: humanity's refusal to be broken. The Vair, however, were not blind. They began to notice the ghost ship disrupting their perfect conquest. They tightened patrols. They spread false signals to lure the Resolute into traps. They began to hunt the hunters. One night, as the ship drifted in the shadow of Saturn's, "Rings!" the alarm blared. A Dominion strike fleet had locked onto their position. 3 cruisers, 2 carriers. "They know we're here," Mara shouted. Kane's jaw tightened. The holo map flared red, enemy symbols closing in. So this was it. The first time the Dominion acknowledged him not as prey, but as a threat. Good, Kane thought. Let them come. "Battle stations," he ordered, voice steady. "Let's show them what humans do when the enemy finally takes us seriously." The Dominion strike fleet came for the Resolute in Saturn's shadow. 3 cruisers advanced in formation, their hulls glimmering with alien runes, while carrier ships loosed squadrons of fighter drones, sleek black darts moving with eerie coordination. Against them, the Resolute was only a scarred cruiser, its hull patched with mismatched plating, its weapons barely holding together. But Kane never saw odds. He saw opportunities. Cut engines. "Let them think we're crippled," Kane ordered. The Resolute drifted, cold and silent, hidden among the glittering fragments of Saturn's rings. The Dominion fighters swarmed closer, circling like sharks tasting blood. At the last possible moment, Kane gave the order. "Fire!" The Resolute roared to life. Hidden cannons blasted from the cover of the ring debris, ripping apart the first wave of drones. The ship surged forward, engines flaring, its guns chewing holes through the nearest cruiser's flank. Explosions lit up the void like fireworks. Across Saturn's horizon, for minutes, chaos reigned. The Dominion pressed hard, but Kane's crew fought harder. Mara rerouted failing power through jury-rigged systems, pushing the engines beyond safe limits. Holt led a boarding counterstrike when alien raiders punched through the hull, his squad mowing them down in brutal close-quarters combat. Every hand aboard the Resolute worked as if their lives and Earth's future depended on it. Because it did. The battle ended with the Dominion retreating, 2 of their ships gutted, and the rest limping away. Humanity had bloodied the hunters, but the victory was more than tactical. Word spread fast. Survivors across the system picked up the transmissions. A lone ship had turned the tide against impossible odds. Kane's defiance was no longer a whisper. It was a spark, and sparks could ignite infernos. Across Mars's underground colonies, people cheered in darkened tunnels. On Europa's scattered mining outposts, families wept with relief. Even on Earth, where skies still burned and cities lay in ruins, the name Resolute carried hope like a torch through the smoke. It wasn't just about winning, it was about proving. The Dominion could bleed. Kane knew the effect this would have. Tyrants ruled by fear, and the moment fear cracked, their control faltered. The Vair had expected a quick conquest, a species that bent easily under chains. Instead, they had awakened humanity's oldest trait, stubborn defiance. Still, Kane also knew the price of carrying that spark. The Dominion would focus on him now. Every trap, every pursuit, every blade would point toward the Resolute. They had become the symbol of resistance, and symbols were always hunted first. Life aboard the ship became relentless. Repairs never ended. Mara often worked until her hands bled, refusing to rest while engines still stuttered. Holt trained squads of volunteers, turning frightened civilians into soldiers who could at least hold a rifle steady when the next boarding came. The medics ran out of supplies faster than they could replace them, but no one spoke of giving up. One, Night after a brutal skirmish near Titan, Kane walked the lower decks. Crew members huddled in corners, some sleeping against bulkheads, others eating cold rations in silence. They were exhausted, half broken, but their eyes followed him with something fierce: trust. They would follow him into hell if he asked. That trust weighed on him heavier than any wound. He paused at a viewport, staring at Saturn's vast rings glittering against the dark. Beautiful, he thought, even with war raging all around. He whispered to himself, not for anyone else to hear. "We're still here." The Dominion couldn't understand it. They had seen species crumble under far less pressure. Yet humanity kept rising, even when buried in ash. And then came the turning point. A signal intercepted on the edge of the Kuiper Belt. A Dominion convoy, carrying supplies and prisoners. Normally, Kane would have avoided such a trap, but this time something in the data caught his attention. The convoy wasn't heavily guarded. The Dominion hadn't expected humans to strike so deep into their lines. Kane gathered his officers in the war room. "This is more than a chance to hurt them," he said, tapping the holographic display. "If there are prisoners aboard, we free them. Survivors need to know we don't just fight, we save our own." Holt grinned, savage and eager. Mara just muttered, "If the ship doesn't tear itself apart first." Kane gave them both a hard look. "Then we hold it together, every bolt, every breath. Because if we succeed here, the whole system will see that humanity fights for each other, and that's a fire they can't put out." No one argued. The trap was set. The Resolute would strike like a knife in the dark, and the Dominion would learn that humanity's spark of defiance was no flicker. It was the beginning of a blaze. The intercepted convoy raid was only the beginning. The Dominion finally moved with purpose, and their trap came at Luna Base. The moon had always been more than stone and dust. It was humanity's first step into the stars, its most fortified colony outside Earth. But when the Dominion descended, they didn't simply attack. They encircled it, fleets spreading in a perfect net, daring Kane to act. Thousands of survivors were trapped beneath the lunar surface, huddled in crumbling shelters as enemy ships tightened their grip. On the Resolute's bridge, the crew studied the display. Red icons filled the holographic sphere, enemy vessels, layered like teeth in a predator's maw. "It's a slaughter waiting to happen," Mara muttered, her fingers flying across the console as she calculated firing arcs. "We won't even get through their outer screen." Sergeant Holt cracked his knuckles. "Then we punch straight through the middle. They won't see it coming." Kane said nothing for a long moment. He stared at the moon, remembering all the soldiers buried there, all the battles fought to claim its dust. The Dominion thought him reckless enough to charge into the jaws of the trap, and maybe they were right, but he wasn't going to leave Luna's people behind. "Plot us a course," Kane said finally. "We break them, or we burn." The Resolute surged forward, engines screaming against their limits. Fighters poured from Dominion carriers swarming like hornets. The crew met them with blistering fire. The first minutes were a blur, shields flashing, hull plates groaning, enemy ships disintegrating under precise salvos. The asteroid fields nearby became graveyards of twisted metal. Then came the counterstrike. 3 Dominion cruisers flanked. Them, plasma lances carving gouges across the Resolute's side. Sparks showered the bridge as systems overloaded. Smoke filled the corridors and alarms screamed through the decks. "Shields collapsing!" Mara shouted. "Hold the line!" Kane barked. The ship dove low, skimming the moon's cratered surface, using ridges as cover. Every move risked tearing them apart, but Kane's instincts guided them through. Holt led Marines against boarding parties that slammed into the hull. In brutal hand-to-hand clashes inside the narrow corridors, blood slicked the walls. Humans fought with knives, rifles, even bare fists, refusing to yield a meter of steel. Still, the Dominion pressed harder. Their flagship, a monstrous dreadnought, loomed ahead, a fortress bristling with cannons, its shadow cutting across Luna's scarred plains. Kane knew the truth then. They weren't meant to survive this. The Dominion had laid their trap to crush humanity's last symbol of defiance. And yet a thought burned in Kane's mind. If he could take the dreadnought down, the Dominion fleet would fracture. He opened a ship-wide channel. His voice carried no tremor, no hesitation, only iron. Crew of the Resolute, you know what we face. You know what waits if we fail. Today, we do not fight for survival. We fight to break their spine. We ram the beast. No one objected. The silence that followed was heavier than steel. Then Holt growled, "About damn time," and slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle. The final charge began. Engines howled, pushing past the red line. The Resolute soared straight at the Dominion dreadnought, weaving through firestorms that shredded space around them. Hull plating peeled away, systems died one by one, but the ship refused to stop. Inside, Mara stayed at her station, even as flames licked the consoles. "Just a little further," she whispered, fingers tightening on the controls. Enemy fire tore across the bridge. Crew members were flung from their posts. Kane gripped the command rail, eyes locked on the looming dreadnought. Impact. In 5 seconds, the computer croaked through static. "Make it count," Kane said softly. The collision was cataclysmic. The Resolute drove itself into the enemy's heart, tearing through decks and reactors. The explosion that followed was blinding, a shockwave of fire and shrapnel that split the dreadnought in half. Half the Dominion fleet vanished in the blast, their formation shattered. Survivors on Luna Base watched from below, cheering and weeping as their executioners burned. Humanity had not only defied the trap, it had destroyed the Predator's teeth. But the cost was staggering. The Resolute was broken, its hull a ruined skeleton drifting above the moon. Fires raged inside. Entire sections of the ship were gone. Hundreds of crew were dead or dying. Kane stood amid the wreckage of the bridge, blood streaking his face, his chest heaving with exhaustion. He looked at what was left of his ship, what was left of his people, and whispered a vow only he could hear. "As long as I breathe, they will never take Earth." The Dominion had suffered their first true defeat, but victory had come at the edge of destruction, and Kane knew the war was far from over. The moon was saved, but humanity's fire was burning on scraps of steel and the will of the few who refused to bow. The wreck of the Resolute drifted for weeks above Luna, a scarred monument against the void. Salvage crews picked through twisted corridors, pulling out survivors and carrying away the fallen. For a time, it felt like the ship's spirit had died with the explosion that tore through the Dominion dreadnought. But Kane refused to let the legend end there. With scavenged parts from wrecked cruisers and stolen Dominion technology, the survivors began to rebuild. The Resolute became less a warship and more a patchwork miracle, her hull bristling with uneven plating, her weapons cobbled together from mismatched sources. Every system hummed with instability, yet somehow it worked. Mara Voss turned miracles into routine, reprogramming alien circuits to sync with human cores. Engineers welded and rewired until sparks were as common as air. To the crew, the ship was no longer just steel. It was a ghost that refused to stay buried. Kane walked its decks every day, speaking to crew members, listening to their fears, reminding them of what they had already endured. His words weren't speeches of glory, they were reminders of grit. "You're still breathing," he told them, "and as long as we breathe, we fight." Yet shadows grew long. The Dominion had been shaken, yes, but not broken. Their fleets continued to scour the solar system, hammering colonies and crushing scattered pockets of resistance. Refugees streamed into hidden outposts, carrying stories of atrocities. Entire populations enslaved, others wiped out. And then came whispers of something greater. The World Eater. Rumors spread first among smugglers and spies, tales of a vessel the size of a small moon forged in the Dominion's core worlds. It was said to carry weapons that could tear continents apart with a single strike. Most dismissed it as myth, but Kane had fought the Dominion long enough to know they didn't bluff. When the first scans confirmed its approach, fear gripped every corner of humanity's fractured resistance. The World Eater blotted out stars when it passed. Its silhouette was a monstrous cathedral of war, bristling with enough firepower to unmake worlds. The message was clear. The Dominion meant to end Earth in one stroke. The crew of the Resolute stared at the data in silence. Mara's voice was little more than a whisper. "We can't fight that." Kane didn't look away from the image. "We don't need to fight it head on. We need to break it from within." It was madness, a suicide mission. Yet no one laughed, because they had seen Kane turn impossible into victory before. As preparations began, the strain of war showed in every corner of the ship. Holt drilled new recruits until their bodies collapsed, barking at them to get up again, forging civilians into soldiers by sheer will. Mara slept in bursts, her hands blackened with grease, her hair singed from overloaded circuits. Even Kane, who had never shown weakness, allowed himself a rare moment of reflection in his quarters, staring at a photo of Earth taken before the war. A blue marble untouched by fire. He clenched it in his fist. If humanity fell, he swore it would not be in silence. The World Eater arrived in the outer system weeks later. Its engines left trails like burning scars across space. The Dominion's Emperor himself was said to be aboard, confident enough to witness the destruction of Earth with his own eyes. The fractured human fleets gathered for the last time. Half-broken ships limped into formation, corvettes with patched hulls, carriers missing entire decks, cruisers stitched together with alien scrap. No one believed they could win. But no one was willing to kneel either. Across every comm channel, Kane's voice reached them. "We are outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched." That's nothing new. They think fear will break us. They think chains will hold us. They think fire will erase us. They are wrong. Because we are human. And when the night is darkest, when the dawn seems furthest away, that is when we fight hardest. A silence followed. Then one by one, ships signaled their reply. For Earth. For humanity. For the fight. On the bridge of the Resolute, Mara whispered, "This is madness." Holt grinned, sliding a combat knife into his belt. "Good. That means it's human." The last stand was coming. The World Eater loomed ahead, a living nightmare of steel and fire, and in its shadow, humanity gathered its courage. Broken fleets, scavenged ships, one scarred captain leading the charge, the dark before. Dawn had arrived, and Kane knew only one thing could follow. Light. The World Eater blotted out the stars. Its hull stretched for kilometers, a fortress of black steel and pulsing crimson veins. Weapons lined its surface like teeth, each capable of erasing cities. When it entered Earth's orbit, entire continents shuddered beneath its shadow. The Dominion Emperor's voice thundered across open channels, translated into every human tongue. "Your species ends tonight." But Kane didn't answer with words. He answered with fire. The Resolute led the charge, engines burning white as the patchwork fleet of humanity hurled itself at the impossible. Broken ships screamed through the void, frigates held together by welding scars, carriers with gaping holes where hangars had once been, corvettes bristling with stolen Dominion weapons. They had no chance of surviving, and yet they came. The first clash was apocalyptic. Plasma beams cut through human formations, tearing vessels apart in blossoms of flame. Dozens of ships vanished in seconds. Still, the rest surged forward. Torpedoes slammed into the World Eater's shields, rattling the behemoth but barely scratching its surface. On the Resolute, alarms blared as enemy fire carved across the hull. Mara shouted over the roar of collapsing systems. "Reactors at 90% overload!" "Keep them burning," Kane ordered. His eyes never left the colossal silhouette ahead. Holt led boarding squads into the chaos as Dominion raiders tore into human ships. He fought like a man already dead, carving through alien warriors with blade and rifle, refusing to yield a single corridor. Blood streaked the walls. Screams echoed through the comms. The ship itself groaned as if it knew this was its final hour. Still, the humans clawed deeper into the monster's defenses. Swarms of kamikaze drones, piloted remotely by desperate engineers, slammed into the World Eater's outer layers, opening gaps in its armor. Salvaged railguns pounded the breaches. Piece by piece, the Titan bled. But it wasn't enough. The World Eater unleashed its superweapon. A beam of molten energy lanced downward, striking Earth's surface. An entire region lit up like glass, continents cracking beneath the force. Billions cried out, their voices echoing through comms and across the planet. Humanity teetered on. The edge of annihilation. Kane made his choice. "Prepare to board," he said, his voice like steel. The crew stared at him. To board the World Eater was madness. But Holt only grinned, teeth bloody. Mara tightened her grip on the controls. No one refused. The Resolute dove into the inferno, weaving through enemy fire, slamming into a breach already torn by kamikaze. Strikes. The ship skidded to a halt inside the World Eater's cavernous interior, grinding against alien plating. "Go!" Kane shouted. Marines poured into the corridors, guns blazing. The halls were monstrous. Towering ceilings, glowing conduits like veins. Their soldiers poured in from every direction. Battle erupted in every passage, brutal and intimate. Grenades echoed like thunder. Blades clashed in showers of sparks. Kane pushed forward with Holt and Mara at his side. The goal wasn't survival. It was the core. Every step bled lives. Marines fell screaming. Holt took hits but kept fighting, dragging men forward with curses and laughter. Mara hacked alien consoles on the run, overriding locks, guiding them deeper. Kane led from the front, rifle steady, eyes burning with fury. Finally they reached it, the World Eater's reactor. A sun trapped in a cage of steel, pulsing with power enough to vaporize worlds. Mara's hands trembled as she wired. "The explosives. Once I start, there's no stopping it. We won't get out." Kane laid a hand on her shoulder. "Then let's make it count." The Dominion forces stormed in. Holt held the line, mowing down wave after wave. A blade pierced his chest, but he didn't fall. He laughed, spitting blood, and detonated his grenades, taking a dozen enemies with him. Mara finished her work, slumping to the floor. Charges set. Kane looked at her, at all of them, at everyone who had given everything to reach this place. His voice echoed through every human channel, across ships, across Earth itself. "Remember this. We are not prey. We are not slaves. We are human. We fight. We endure. We win." Then he triggered the detonation. The explosion tore through the World Eater like a second sun. Its hull split apart, fire ripping through every deck. The shock wave consumed Dominion fleets, scattering. Survivors in chaos. In orbit, human ships saw the impossible. The behemoth collapsing. The hunters fleeing for the first time. On Earth, survivors lifted their eyes to the burning sky. The monster that had cast its shadow over their world was gone. The cost was unbearable. Kane, Holt, Mara, all of them vanished in the fire. The Resolute died with them. But their sacrifice broke the Dominion. The Empire had been dealt a wound it could never forget, and in the silence that followed, across every shattered colony and burning city, one truth spread. Humanity had stood. Humanity had endured. Humanity had won. The stars themselves would carry the memory of Earth's last stand.